What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, and today's kind of a sad day. This is going to be our last must buy and sell trade target video for the 2023 fantasy football season. Trade deadlines are coming up. A lot of them have already passed, so today we're hitting a little bit of a buzzer beater. We're going to go through, I think, 4 buys, 3 sells, some of them for contenders that are way up at top, locked in a bye week, some of them for people sort of scratching and clawing for that last playoff spot. As always, if you enjoy, make sure down below, subscribe, leave a like. Let's go. Now, first up, we have Puka Nacua as our first must-buy trade target here. Now, it just kind of feels like people have forgotten about Puka Nacua as what he was early in the year, where he's like a top 12 guy in yards per out run. Honestly, through like the first 8 weeks, his rookie season was going almost toe-to-toe with like Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. He was that good. And then we have Kupp come back. Then we have Stafford get hurt. And it's just kind of been not negative energy towards Puka Nacua, but he's not held to that same standard. Now, we have Stafford coming back here. I just finished on my rest of season rankings, which, by the way, that's kind of what I base these videos off of. It's late in the year, but if you guys want my rest of season rankings, they're on the Patreon, patreon.com/Ron Stewart. I have a link in the description, in the comment section down below. But I think I ranked him as like a top 12 wide receiver rest of season. Stafford is back and healthy. We have a tweet here from Dr. Jesse Morse. Stafford had a right UCL thumb sprain. He's going to be back in week 11. Low re-injury risk. Start him. It seems like he's going to be fine. On top of that, they signed Carson Wentz. So Carson Wentz isn't amazing, of course, but he's better than Brett Rypien. It's at least some insurance in case if something happens to Stafford. Now, need I remind everybody, Puka Nacua was absolutely balling, even with Cooper Kupp in these games. He had a few games here with Stafford. Dwayne McFarland pointed out here where Puka had 16.7 points per game in the games with Stafford and Cooper Kupp healthy. 16.7 points per game would be good enough as the wide receiver 11 in points per game over the entire season. That's a back-end wide receiver 1. That's what I have him ranked at. And as of right now on Fantasy Calc, which we'll talk about in a second, it's like pretty much a redraft fantasy football market. It has him as like wide receiver 22. Again, for me, I think at worst, he's a top 15 wide receiver rest of the year. And then on top of that, it's late in the season right now, so we're looking towards the playoffs. His playoff schedule is juicy. He gets the Giants, who is allowing the second most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. The Saints is tough. That's going to be 25th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. So that's actually a tough matchup. But then week 17, he gets the Giants, who is allowing the third most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. So 2 really, really nice layup matchups here. Now, when we talk about what kind of trades we're doing for Puka Nacua, that brings us to Fantasy Calc, which is a site that compiles over millions of fantasy football trades, however you want to look at it. It's literally just fantasycalc.com, and they have a trade database that spans from, I guess, like Sleeper, ESPN, everything possible, and it's just a good way of seeing kind of what's going on in terms of the trade market. Now, big disclaimer, we say this in every video, these aren't going to be perfect, all right? There's some that are like, oh my God, like that's a crazy trade. But I try and pick out some of the ones that are a little bit more realistic for you guys to look at. Now, we look at what we can get for Puka Nacua in 1 quarterback leagues, 12 teamers, half PPR and full PPR. We get this list. Now, 2 to 3, so it's like a 1-for-1 or 2 to 1. We have this list. Isaiah Pacheco, if Isaiah Pacheco wasn't in my RB1 or RB2 spot, very easily trading him away for Puka Nacua. Jordan Addison, I think you could add a piece, but like Jordan Addison in a small piece Puka Nacua, I wouldn't mind. I'm trying to think like, could you do Jordan Addison like Jerome Ford or Jordan Addison and Jalen Warren for Puka Nacua? I would be all over that. What else sticks out here? George Kittle for Puka Nacua. We actually have George Kittle as a sell later on in this video. If I had a Dalton Schultz or a Trey McBride or somebody I got out, even if I had like a Logan Thomas, I think I'd do this trade if I'm struggling at wide receiver. Pittman for Nacua is about a wash to me, but I would prefer Nacua. It's not really a deal that I would go for, though. Rachaad White, again, if he's somebody that's not in my RB1 or RB2 spot, very easily for Puka Nacua. I love Tank Dell, but if you can sell high on Tank Dell and get Puka Nacua in return for him, I absolutely would. Somebody's struggling at tight end, and you can turn Christian Kirk and David Njoku into Puka, I would. Does anything else stick out? If you can do Garrett Wilson for Puka Nacua in a piece, I would absolutely do that. I actually love this one here as well. As I actually like Deontay Johnson. Almost had him as a buy, but I think he just popped up with an injury I think it's a thumb injury, which I was going to have him as a buy. So that's a bonus buy. If Deontay Johnson, this video is going to come out, I believe this is going to come out Wednesday night or like Thursday morning. If you see this later in the week, like Friday, and Deontay Johnson's off injury report and he looks like he's going to play, I think he's a great buy candidate. But that just about does it for our Puka Nacua trade scenarios here. Now, our next player we're going to talk about is another one that I feel like these early season darlings that are sort of running cold and getting forgotten about. Those are the guys that I sort of like to target at this point in the year. And Nico Collins is the perfect example of that, where you have all of this C.J. Stroud buzz. The Texans passing offense is going crazy, and it's really Tank Dell at the center of that, then Dalton Schultz, and then Noah Brown, who's been absolutely insane. Now, I think Noah Brown, I don't know. I don't want to say he's not going anywhere. I kind of think that he's earned his right to play in front of Robert Woods at this point, but I still think Nico Collins is a guy. Now, he hasn't given you a game over 15 PPR points since week 4 versus Pittsburgh, but we've seen those massive highs where if you're in like a 2 wide receiver, 2 flex league, you're starting 4 wide receivers, having a wide receiver with that ceiling of 25 plus points down the stretch is absolutely massive. Now, again, I think he's kind of been out of sight, out of mind. He's also dealing with an injury right now where Deepak Chona, he is a sports surgeon. He went to he might have gone to Harvard or Stanford, something crazy like that. Nico Collins, average timeout 1 to 2 weeks. So I want to make it clear here before we go further with Nico Collins. This is a luxury buy. All right, this is if you have like a bye week locked up. If you're a top 3 team, like if you're already locked into the playoffs or it's looking really good for you, Nico Collins is a good buy because he's not somebody you're sticking in your lineup this week. He's coming off of injury. He said he's going to play. Deepak Chona has him here as like an average 1 to 2 weeks out. It seems like by the time we get to the meaningful weeks, like week 13, week 14, week 15, he should be just fine, back to his old role, and that's really exciting. Now, when we talk about the offense here, he's in an offense that you really want exposure to, right, where he has C.J. Stroud, and then on top of that, he gets a Week 15 matchup versus the Titans and a Week 17 matchup versus the Titans. Really weird how they scheduled that this year, but Week 15 is going to be Houston versus Tennessee. Week 17 is going to be Houston versus Tennessee, so that's huge for Derrick Henry. He always goes crazy versus Texans, but on the opposite side, that's great for your Tank Dells of the world and your Nico Collins of the world, where the Tennessee Titans are allowing the 7th most fantasy points to wide receivers, and you get that matchup twice in the fantasy playoffs. It wouldn't shock me at all if Nico Collins was like a top 12 wide receiver from weeks 15 through 17 or drops like a 25 piece on one of those weeks in your flex spot. That has to feel good. Now, we look at what Nico Collins is trading for. It doesn't really seem like it's going to be all that expensive. It's not going to be super cheap, but it shouldn't be super difficult to get Nico Collins onto the squad. Now, this seems like a little bit of a junk trade, but if you can take one of these Chuba Hubbards, Gus Edwards, and just take like a random, I don't know, like Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, Jahan Dotson, they all fall in this area of guys that I'm not stoked to start. Boom. I don't mind that for Nico Collins, a little 2-for-1 here. Is there any? Yeah, I think James Cook, Cortland Sutton, I probably wouldn't. That's tough. I actually like JSN. I almost had him as a trade target here, but if you could do a straight swap of JSN for Nico Collins, I absolutely would. With Nico Collins as well, again, this is a luxury buy. I would target a team out there, especially if Nico Collins' status is truly up in the air this week. I would see if you could pluck him off of a team that's like 50-50 make the playoffs right now and be like, okay, I'll give you a player that's for sure starting this week in a good matchup. I like the George Pickens one as well. Nico Collins over George Pickens for me very easily. Devin Singletary is close. If Devin Singletary isn't your RB1 or 2 and you're really weak at flex, I don't hate it, but that one's pretty tough for me to swallow. Christian Kirk for Nico Collins, that's about a wash. I wouldn't do that. I would do Trey McBride for Nico Collins, assuming that you had a tight end in front of him. Like, let's say, I imagine it's not all that rare if somebody out there has like Dalton Kincaid or Sam Laporta and you just have like Trey McBride chilling on your bench. I don't hate a move like that. Is there anything else that sticks out to me? Not really. Amari Cooper for Nico Collins straight up, I would do every single day, all day actually. I would do Drake London for Nico Collins as well, if that's on the table. Now, our next buy candidate here is going to be Aaron Jones. Now, Aaron Jones, really good in week 1, pulls his hamstring, is like on and off the injury report, he comes back in limited snaps. Now, the last 3 weeks, he's played over 50% of the snaps, and it still feels like he's working back from the hamstring injury. He's still not as efficient as we're used to with Aaron Jones. But the good thing is that the usage has been there. That's all we really care about. Now, this is going to be from PFF's expected points per game model, where it just takes into account your red zone touches, your goal line touches, your targets, your carries, all of that. How many fantasy points should you be putting up? And over the last 3 weeks, again, the last 3 weeks are the first time since the hamstring injury that he's been at 50% or more of the snaps. He's been the RB10 in points per game and expected points per game over that span. No one else on this list is underperforming like him. Or I guess Saquon and DeAndre Swift have been as well. But he's been getting the volume we're looking for. I think things are going to bounce back. He gets a huge bounce back this week against a Chargers team that can't stop a nosebleed. We've seen teams go absolutely bonkers on the Chargers when it comes to the run game. Last week, David Montgomery had a 75-yard touchdown on them. Jahmyr Gibbs went crazy on them. It wouldn't shock me at all if this is the week where we get an Aaron Jones bounce back. You get an RB2 the rest of the year. I wanted to make sure I included more than one running back in the buy section of this video because I think there's going to be some teams out there where you're scrambling for running back. Maybe you have Devin Singletary. I like Devin Singletary, but when Dameon Pierce comes back, things should get muddied by the time we get to fantasy playoffs. Like I think that could shift back. Same with like a Darrell Henderson, right? Like maybe you've just been kind of slapping a Band-Aid on your RB2 spot with Darrell Henderson. And if you want to be looking to sort of upgrade that spot, I do like Aaron Jones as like an RB2 that has some serious upside just because of like his explosion, his efficiency he's shown. I'm still not a believer, as much as like I'm pretty anti-old, dusty running backs. I don't think Aaron Jones is all the way washed just yet. Now, when you look at what you can get for him, I like him as like a throw-in and a 2-for-1. I do want to see, so this is where he's going for on Fantasy Calc. I don't mind this one at all. I don't think that it's really all that realistic. But if you could trade down from DeAndre Swift or Kenneth Walker and net yourself Aaron Jones and like a big piece like Laporta, I absolutely do love that. What else sticks out here? Yeah, same thing here, like Swift for, I don't even necessarily think that Swift is a sell, but if I could do Swift for Aaron Jones and Godwin, that's so close, I probably prefer Swift in that one. What else sticks out here? T. Higgins for Aaron Jones, I would do. Deontay Johnson for Aaron Jones, I would do. I like T. Higgins, man, but the injuries have piled up this year. I really don't know what to expect for him rest of the season. If something like Demario Douglas and Jalen Warren, like if you could take a Jalen Warren, I don't mind a 2-for-1 for Aaron Jones either, where if you could take Jalen Warren, again, Gus Edwards, Jerome Ford, we're going to talk about him in a little bit, but Brian Robinson, and you can add like a wide receiver you got off waivers, I would do that all day long for Aaron Jones. I don't mind if Jacoby Myers isn't someone that's making your lineup in a given week. I don't mind Jacoby Myers for Aaron Jones. Nothing else really sticks out though. I don't know. I don't know if it takes too long me going to the second page. I don't mind Najee Harris, and even if to add like a little bit of a sweetener on top, Rachaad White and Jaden Reed, probably not. I do think at this point, I know that we've had Rachaad White as a sell recently. Rachaad White and Aaron Jones are probably about even value-wise for me. George Pickens for Aaron Jones, that would be very, very easy for me to do. Lockett for Aaron Jones, that's very easy. But let's see, what else do we have on this list of buys? Yeah, so our fourth and final buy, I left it for fourth because he's basically a buy every single week. But I have to mention him again. We have Breece Hall. There is so much negativity around the Jets. They haven't scored a touchdown in what feels like 3.5 seasons at this point. It's been excruciating to watch. Everyone has a sour taste in their mouth from the primetime games, but he still had like 10 PPR points. He has like a 10-point floor. He's been great. It hasn't been amazing the last 2 weeks, but we still are about like 19 points per game over his 9 career games, 50% plus of the snaps. He's been good at fantasy football. You just have to sort of hold your nose and see what happens. But the big thing that's changed here is all the stuff that happened last week that I talked about, the offensive line getting healthier, schedule lightening up, that's all still there. But with Breece Hall, the big thing this week is Michael Carter gets released by the Jets. Now, if you follow me on Twitter, I am a nuisance on Twitter. I'm going to be completely honest. I am, every single Jets game, I'm screaming at the top of my lungs, stop giving the ball to Dalvin Cook. Stop letting Michael Carter take away third down and distance and 2-minute drill snaps. Now, I think a lot of people are going to be like, well, Michael Carter leaving only really affects Dalvin Cook behind him. It's going to be more Dalvin Cook. Now, it's going to be a little bit more Dalvin Cook, but I think the big picture here that people are sort of missing is the thing that was so excruciating as a Jets fan. Now, I hate to go homer on you guys, but the biggest problem, I'm a nerd myself. A lot of nerds say, running backs don't matter. And I think largely running backs don't matter, but I think at the tails of it, right, like your Devin Achans and your Jahmyr Gibbs and your Breece Halls, I think that those guys do matter, especially with awful offenses. Now, the biggest issue for the Jets is if you look at the stats, I don't have them on hand. They're depressing to look at, but the Jets have one of the worst conversion rates on third down in the modern era right now. Like they're converting third downs 20% of the time. Most of them are third and longs. And I'm not saying that they'd be now league average magically, but the big issue or one of the big issues, of course, the big issue is Zach Wilson and Nathaniel Hackett, but a smaller issue is that every time we're in third down and long, we take Breece Hall off the field and you put Michael Carter out there because he is the passing down back. Now, Michael Carter is going to run empty calorie routes. He's not going to really do anything. He'll catch the ball right where it's thrown and then he'll fall down, or he'll pass block. He had like a chop block versus the Raiders on Monday night or Sunday night, and that just completely, or no, it wasn't the Raiders. No, it was the Raiders. It was the Raiders on Sunday night, and he chop blocked someone. I think that's kind of what led him to getting cut. But what I'm trying to say here, what I'm leading up to, is that the big things to look at. Now, this is my Fantasy Life's utilization report tool. It's very, very cool. And you can see here the 2-minute drill and long down and distance snaps. Those matter a ton because those are passing situations. Targets matter more than carries for running backs. When we look here, Breece Hall, as good of a receiving back as he is, we've seen him all the time where he takes these like button hooks where he's just like the check down and he, leaks out of the backfield, 5 yards downfield, faces Zach Wilson, catches the ball, and he's taken those to the house. He's taken those for 30 yards before. Michael Carter doesn't have that in his bag. Michael Carter is somewhere between Tyler Algier and Samaje Perine. That has a role somewhere. The Cardinals picked him up or whatever, but when you have Breece Hall and you can't move the ball on third downs, it needs to be Breece Hall out there running those routes, because when you check down to Breece Hall, he can break it for a big one, convert the third down. Michael Carter could not do that. Now, when we see here the last 3 games from the utilization report, we've had Michael Carter just in the last game, 27% of the 2-minute drill, 43% of the long down and distance. Before that, 68% of the long down and distance. So he was out there like 68% of the third downs, 50% of the 2-minute drill. Before that, 70% of the 2-minute drill. That was the game where I think he had he had 5 catches on the final drive. But now those are all, I would say about 90% of those are going to Breece Hall. That is not Dalvin Cook's wheelhouse. He is not the third down back. He is not the pass catching back. He is a between the tackles bruiser. Now, sure, is he going to steal the occasional goal line carry? Yes, but Breece Hall is scoring fantasy points without many goal line carries. The Jets aren't scoring touchdowns, period, so it doesn't really matter a ton to me. The routes and the targets as well, where you can see Michael Carter running 15% of the routes last week, 40% before that, 23% before that. A lot of those are going to go to Breece Hall, and if Breece Hall now sees the majority of the routes, right? If he can get that route percentage from, it was at 57% last week, it should go up to probably about 65% plus, which is huge. If that long down and distance number can go to like 70% plus, if the 2-minute drill can get to like 80% plus, we're really in business. A huge, huge thing that was weighing down Breece Hall was Michael Carter's involvement on those passing down situations. And if Breece Hall is going to be in there now, that is a huge bump, because if you're not getting goal line carries, you need to get targets. And now Breece Hall is going to be out there in more situations to get targets, which is absolutely huge. So I would take any of the negative energy from the last 2 primetime games and turn that into a reason to buy Breece Hall. Now we look at what he's going for. Chris Olave for Breece Hall, yes. Derrick Henry for Breece Hall and another piece, yes, very easily. What else sticks out? These are junk offers here. If you could do Amari Cooper in if you could do Amari Cooper and Zach Moss, or Amari Cooper and Jalen Warren for Breece Hall, I would do that all day long. I would personally take Breece Hall over Josh Jacobs straight up, but if the market says that Josh Jacobs is valued more, see if you can get a piece on top. Can you do Josh Jacobs for Breece Hall and Josh Downs? I would do that all day long. Jahmyr Gibbs for Breece in a piece, that's very easy. If you can do Courtland Sutton in a running back like Courtland Sutton and Najee Harris to get Breece Hall, I would do that as well. Adam Thielen for Breece, very easy. Joe Mixon for Breece, easy. David Montgomery for Breece, I would do that as well. What else sticks out? If you can do Javonte in a piece, I don't think you can do a quarterback, but Javonte, if you could do like Javonte and Sutton, or Javonte and Jahan Dotson, or Javonte and Amari Cooper for Breece Hall, I would do that all day. I personally would take Breece over Tony Pollard, though making that trade would not feel very good. Now, the next players we're going to talk about are going to be our sell candidates. Now, I do want to let you guys know this video is sponsored by Underdog Fantasy. They are the best. We got the light in the background. They are the biggest sponsor of the channel. They are what helps keep the lights on in the basement as we get into November, December, the dark ages of the fantasy football season, as you will. But almost every Thursday night or primetime game, they have these specials out on Underdog Fantasy, which is, of course, best ball. And you can do drafts for the primetime games. You can do draft for this Week 11 main slate. You can do drafts for, like, NBA games are going to happen on Thursday night. You can do drafts for NBA games instead of your, like, DFS salary, and it's super confusing. It's really cool. They also have Pick'ems. This is the Pick'em special for Joe Burrow. higher than 0.5 total yards. He's going to get higher than 0.5 total yards, and it's a way to just get sort of a freebie on your pick'em slip, where if you get 4 correct, I think you 10 extra money. If you get 5 correct, you 20 extra money, and you just go higher or lower on fantasy point projections, reception projections. You got passing touchdowns, pass attempts, pretty much any stat out there. You can kind of scroll through the lines, see where things are sort of soft, and you can get a nice little sweat in for the primetime game. You can find that sitting in the pick'em lobby as soon as you join Underdog Fantasy as a new customer. If you're new, you can use promo code Ron and they'll match your first deposit up to $100 as well. You can find links to Underdog Fantasy in the description, in the comment section down below. It'll take you to Underdog Fantasy. It'll already put in promo code Ron, and you will find the Joe Burrow special in the pick'em lobby waiting for you. Now, our first sell, the theme of the top 2 sells here are going to be name, brand, name value. All right, and Saquon Barkley, this is a sell if you're fighting for a playoff spot. All right, if you're out there 5-5, you're crawling to the finish line, trying to make the playoffs, I think you got to cut bait with Saquon Barkley. First of all, because he's a name brand. Everyone knows who Saquon Barkley is. I know that he hasn't been good the last few weeks, but he's still Saquon Barkley, and that name alone carries a lot of weight. I just think it does in fantasy football. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think in a lot of leagues, especially more casual, maybe office, home leagues, I think that he's going to carry a lot of weight with his name. And I would sell based on 2 things. 1 is name, and 2, any and all Tyrod Taylor optimism. If there's any Tyrod Taylor optimists out there, get him off of your team. Now, Tyrod Taylor, this is from Jesse Morris. Tyrod Taylor is projected to come back week 14. That's cool, but that's going to be week 14, 15, 16, 17. That's the last 4 weeks you're going to get. So that means this week, right, week 11, week 12, week 13, next 3 weeks, which are your most important weeks to get to the playoffs as a fringe team, he's going to be bad for. He has been, in his last 3 games where Tommy DeVito has played the majority of the snaps, right? That's his entire resume. Tommy DeVito has only played the last 3 games in terms of like being the real quarterback there. And in those games, Saquon's gotten a lot of volume, but he's at 12.4 points per game as the RB23 over that span. I have to imagine Saquon Barkley, again, the name value, what he brings, what he can do for you in the playoffs. Anyone that's optimistic about the Tyrod Taylor comeback can trade as like a back-end RB1, right? Like maybe like RB12, RB13-ish rest of season. So if you can take that value and shift into somebody that you don't have to wait till week 14 for him to like really come alive, I would absolutely do that. Now, on top of that, the second tweet below, Jesse Morris says he re-injured his right high ankle sprain he had early on in the season, should have a dip in performance, could re-injure it. So there's just like so many question marks and red flags with Saquon that if I could move on from him, I think you absolutely have to, especially if you are scratching and clawing for a playoff spot, I think you absolutely should. Now we look at what he's trading for right now. It is definitely going to be tough sledding. You're definitely going to have to bargain, kick some tires on a lot of teams here. But let's see. All of these are pretty lopsided. Now, this one's tough. I like this value-wise. Like, I would do Saquon and piece for Bijan, but, of course, Bijan's on bye. But if you can do Saquon and Noah Brown, something like this, whether that's Noah Brown, whether that's Jerry Jeudy, Jahan Dotson, you can get Bijan, Breece, Jonathan Taylor, Kamara, Josh Jacobs, any of those guys, I absolutely would. If you could do Saquon and a piece to get to Jefferson, I absolutely would. If you could do Saquon, this one's close, but I don't think I would. Saquon for Jalen Warren and Devontae Smith, I don't think I could do that. Saquon Barkley for Tank Dell and Ramondre Stevenson. If you are in a struggling spot, that's not all that far off. That's not all that crazy to me. Tank Dell and Ramondre, again, like we are in a really brutal spot with Saquon. I wouldn't quite do Mike Evans, but if I could do Saquon in a piece, like if I could do Saquon and Chris Godwin, or Saquon, what else is kind of in that range? Saquon and DeAndre Hopkins, Saquon and Amari Cooper, Saquon, anything in that range for Amon-Ra St. Brown, CeeDee Lamb, anything like that, I absolutely would. I don't think you can do Saquon for Walker straight up, but if you can do Saquon in a small little piece for Kenneth Walker, absolutely do that. Does anything else stick out as like more? Saquon for Derrick Henry straight up. I have Derrick Henry over I have Saquon over Derrick Henry rest of season. But man, if you need wins like right now, I don't hate it. I'm not at all opposed to a move like that. Does anything else stick out? Saquon and Khalil Herbert for Jonathan Taylor, I would do that all day long. Now, again, Jonathan Taylor's on bye, so it kind of conflicts what we've been talking about. Saquon for Swift, I would do that in a heartbeat. Saquon for Mixon in a piece, I think I would do that as well. Saquon for Montgomery, if you can get a little piece on top of Montgomery, I think I absolutely would. anything like that. If you could do, I think that there might be some places out there. If you can do Saquon for Devin Achane straight up, I would. Now, again, I don't know that that's on the table, but I think in some leagues, if you just out of the blue offered that straight up, I think some might take that deal. So just see what you can do. Kick the tires on running backs around your league, and just see if you can maybe even approach somebody that has like a top 2 seed locked up. Do a little art of the deal in the DM. Say, hey, Tyrod's coming back week 14. I need someone that can play for me now. See what you can do. It's not going to be easy. No one really wants to stink of Saquon right now. But again, I think if you are out there and struggling, he's got to go. After that, we have our second sell here. Also on name brand. These aren't necessarily sell highs. You can't always sell high on players. But Amari Cooper has to go. This is a guy where Deshaun Watson, he is now hurt. Adam Schefter showed here. Kevin Stefanski told reporters Deshaun Watson or Dorian Thompson-Robinson is going to replace Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson's now out for the season, and this is a big issue because of this. We have a stat from JJ Zachariason where Amari Cooper in games with Deshaun Watson, he's at 17.6 PPR points per game, 24.2% target share per game. Amari Cooper is still commanding targets without Deshaun Watson, 25.4% target share, but a 9.1 points per game. That is not going to cut it. 9.1 points per game is very, very bad, and that's largely in part because this is what he's working with at quarterback. This is QB efficiency from RBsDon'tMatter.com or RBSDM.com. QB efficiency, so EPA per play, per play efficiency. It weights your touchdowns, first downs, interceptions, all of that on a per play basis. And the completion percentage above expected. So just based on your ADOT, your wide receivers drops, what should your completion percentage be relative to that, right? Are you overperforming, underperforming that? Anybody in the bottom left quadrant, trash. Now, Dorian Thompson-Robinson is going to be starting this week. He is in your hell area of Tommy DeVito and Brett Rypien. PJ Walker, not that far behind if they were to bench Dorian Thompson-Robinson. It's just awful. Now, the third arrow is just showing you where Deshaun Watson was. Deshaun Watson wasn't being a world beater, but he's at least league average efficiency-wise this year. You can see him in that same range as like Derek Carr, Jimmy Garoppolo, Tannehill, Jordan Love, Trevor Lawrence, those type of guys. PJ Walker and Dorian Thompson-Robinson, DTR, is not going to cut it for you, and that's what the issue is. So, in my rest of season rankings, he is my wide receiver 35. I think a lot of sites and trade calculators might have him more of like the wide receiver 25. So again, if I could sell him, I absolutely would. Now, this is what Amari Cooper is trading for over on Fantasy Calc. Again, it's not going to be a sell high. It's not going to be pretty. But I think you just kind of hold your nose and see what you can do. Amari Cooper, if you can do Amari Cooper in like a small little piece for Debo, 100% do that. Amari Cooper and Saquon for Kamara is close, but I guess I'll chill on that. What else sticks out with Amari Cooper? If I could bundle Amari Cooper with Derrick Henry, you're not going to get Tyreek, but if you can get any of Keenan Allen, CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown, anything in that range of wide receivers, I absolutely would. If you can do Amari Cooper in a piece for Chris Olave, I would. Chris Olave is on bye. Maybe you can find somebody. That's a big thing right now. Somebody needs a win. Find the guy who needs a win. Find the guy who's on bye. Chris Olave is on bye. Offer him your Amari, maybe like a small little piece on top and see what happens there. If you need a tight end, Cooper for Laporta, I would do that all day. What else sticks out? Cooper and Singletary for Metcalf, I don't hate that. Again, if you're in a spot where you don't need Singletary and he's not starting right away for you and he's like more of a flex, I don't hate it. Mark Cooper for Devin Achane. Just seeing some of these trades, Devin Achane, I'll give him a bonus. He's a buy right now. I don't know. I think that it sort of ranges all over the place what people sort of value Devin Achane at. My rest of season rankings, I think I put him at like RB10 rest of season. Devin Achane, RB's pretty rough this year. Devin Achane is one of the top 12 guys I would want at the position. Amari Cooper for Tank Dell, straight up, I would do that all day. If you have to add a small piece on top, definitely don't be afraid to. But I think those sort of make sense. Amari Cooper and like a quarterback, if somebody's like really down bad, maybe they lost Deshaun Watson, boom. Amari Cooper and Dobbs for Devontae Smith. I don't hate something like that either. Now, our seventh trade target here, our final must-sell trade target, Brian Robinson. This is somebody who is not known to be a receiving back coming off of one of his best games of the year on production that he has never once in his entire career dating back to college has ever done. He had his first ever 100-yard receiving game. I don't want to talk out of turn here, but I swear in college he did not have a 100-yard receiving game ever. I think he barely had, like I'm checking right now, from Alabama, his best games. He only had 2 games ever at Alabama over 60 receiving yards. It was 5 for 68 and 1 versus Mississippi State, 4 for 60 and 0 versus Texas A&M. This past weekend, he had 6 for 119 and a touchdown. He's never even been over 50 receiving yards before, never mind 100 in the NFL. Say what you want, but that's just simply not sustainable. Only 8 rush attempts when his bread and butter is between the tackles. That usage that he had last week is not sustainable. He is not going to ever be a 100-yard receiving guy, 6 reception guy. He's never even been over 4 receptions before in his NFL career. That was what I think it's fair to call that an outlier, which is why I would be looking to sell. Again, he's on a little bit of a hot streak right now. And if we look at PFX expected points per game, which is again based on your targets, red zone targets, ADOT, all of that, Brian Robinson is at 9.8 expected points per game over the last few weeks. Yeah, this is over the last 5 weeks for him. You know, in the expected points per game area of guys like Hunt, Algier, Warren, Dillon, James Cook, I think that right now he's trading in a tier above those guys, which is why I would trade him away. So he is the RB 37 in expected points per game. He is the RB 15 in points per game over that span. That is a massive discrepancy. Again, that production is not replicatable. I think that's a word. Now, I will say, Antonio Gibson popped up on the injury report. What I would do is I would wait to kind of see more of that info come out, and if there's anything concrete about Antonio Gibson not playing, and you're in a spot where, let's say Antonio Gibson goes down, Brian Robinson definitely gets an upgrade that week. He gets an upgrade in that week. But if you're not in a spot where you have like a 0 RB or hero RB team, you don't need that in your lineup. Like let's say your flex is stacked, your RB1 and 2 is stacked, Brian Robinson has to go in that scenario. But if you are scratching and clawing for a playoff spot and Antonio Gibson can't go, feel free to just hold on to Brian Robinson and ride that out for that week. So I like the idea of sort of selling on the optimism that Antonio Gibson won't play or that he's going to smash without Antonio Gibson. But you guys will see. You can get some decent stuff for Brian Robinson. There's a lot of running back thirst right now. People are looking for B-Rob. I would sell Brian Robinson for DJ Moore straight up. B-Rob for Laporta straight up. I would do that all day. B-Rob for Metcalf straight up. I would. If you're down bad at flex or wide receiver, I don't mind for Adam Thielen, but I probably wouldn't. You're not going to get Achane straight up, but Brian Robinson in a piece for Achane 100%. Again, it seems like his trade value is all over the place. Achane. What else sticks out when it comes to Brian Robinson? Brian Robinson and Puka for ETN. I don't hate it. We had Puka as a buy earlier, but if you could instead of Puka do Garrett Wilson, an Olave, a Metcalf, and you can get into the ETN, Eckler, Jonathan Taylor's, Bijan Robinson, Breece Hall conversation, absolutely would look to do that. Does anything else stick out? I wouldn't do B-Rob and Keenan Allen for A.J. Brown, but if you could do B-Rob and like Devontae Adams for A.J. Brown, I certainly would. Is there anything else that sticks out? Brian Robinson for Devontae Smith, I would. Brian Robinson for Michael Pittman, I would. So just kick the tires, see what you can kind of do there. Brian Robinson, I think, is a perfect sell high candidate for this week. That is going to do it for us today. Again, make sure you check it out. Underdog Fantasy. Use promo code RON. They will match your first deposit up to $100, and you can use the new customer special. It's going to be waiting for you in the Pick'em lobby. Higher on Joe Burrow, 0.5 total yards. As always, I appreciate you guys watching. If you enjoyed, make sure you go down below, subscribe, leave a like. Last trade target video of the season. I will say we're going to probably shift. I think like next week, Thanksgiving, probably only have like 3 videos next week. It's going to be tough. Like games are going to happen earlier in the week. Going to be taking a little bit of a break to spend time with family. And then after that, we're probably going to be sort of shifting towards Dynasty a little bit. We'll probably talk about the 2024 class, maybe do a Dynasty trade target video. We'll see. So let me know how you guys feel about that and sort of what you guys want to see outside of trade target videos. Because I'll definitely still do the top 10 lessons learned, waiver wire, and then like my sneaky starts, like must start video at the end of the week. But I have probably like 1 or 2 video slots a week that are kind of open to do whatever we want. That can be rest of season rankings, playoff stashes, Dynasty stuff, Devy stuff, all of that cool stuff. So let me know what you guys want to see moving forward. We're deep in the season. I appreciate everyone that's watching. Like anyone that's watching content of mine at like week 11, week 12, it means 1, you're a true supporter. You're watching videos through to the end. And 2, it means your teams are doing well, right? Like if your team sucks and you're out of the playoffs, like people are pretty much checked out when it comes to fantasy football. So proud of you. If you're watching these videos, your team is doing well. I am happy to know that your team is doing what it should be. Now, with all that being said, again, I appreciate you guys, and I will see y'all in the next one.
stones, like this froze. Ice cold, ice around my body like I'm